and whatever I see is smiling at me. Love is who I am. So hello there everyone, and welcome to this Galactic update that accompanies this month's Ascension update. For those of you who want to go much deeper into this topic, we will go more into the nature of the galactic history behind everything that we've been talking about in the Ascension update, why we have functioned the way we did up until this point as human beings, and what actually contributed to our bodies being a certain way, and what does this path now lead us into the new body. So in the Ascension update, I have shared a little more about the new body process, but for those of you who maybe haven't watched, although I strongly advise you to do so, I want to read you this crucial sentence again. So the process of this new body crystalline shift is very challenging for the embodiment of higher crystalline consciousness. So the form must expand gradually so there is no loss of form possible, which is a blending experience. So in this video, we will go deeper into the roots of what actually is the galactic history and what kind of issues as a human collective we have experienced. But if you want to go deeper into the nature of the new body, I am creating probably this week a course on the new body template and how to actually move much deeper into this process. So before I start today's topic, I want to once again share the updates for those of you who haven't followed in the Ascension notes in the first video. There is going to be big shifts or changes in the way I do things and the way I work. I want to share with you first of all that, as you know, we all have soul gifts. It doesn't matter what kind of consciousness of the soul, what kind of like the purpose is behind the reason why we're coming here. And like I said, it was much more difficult for volunteer soul types to be on this planet and support themselves, because somehow our unrestricted flow and everything just being one, and you know, that Neptunian consciousness, when everything is already shared with all and it's universal, but somehow we often had issues of understanding the value of who we are. So I believe that this Venus retrograde is kind of helping us to shift in that direction, and this was specifically true for myself as well. So I want to share these updates, what's changing, so you will be on the lookout, so you'll be updated and informed about this process, because I have been receiving for a while now guidance from my illumined group that the changes we're going through are very intense, and as everyone has their own place, their own sovereign place in the dynamic of this unfolding ascension, they've shared with me that my main gift here, you know, besides what I do as a creation pillar, that's just pure essence work. It's pure energy form and the work I do behind the scenes and the work I do in nature. But the work I do here in the shared collective, in the human ascending collective, and especially the work with volunteer souls who are here to assist this process and develop their own missions, they've said that my main gift is basically to translate the meaning, so the causal levels that move into, you know, the causal is the level of pure, it's like the cause, right? It's where the cause has its root. So when these levels precipitate and move forward and more into the physical nature of things, the way they gain structure is sometimes for the people it's difficult to translate the energy because it's just so refined. So those of us who actually exist more at the refined level that we do at the human level, which is true for all volunteer soul types, it's very natural for us to translate these subtle messages and energies. So they actually told me my main gift is to establish this, and to continue this direction. And because I channel so well these energies behind the process of unfolding ascension, I can assist people with their greater understanding of the process, so they don't think something's wrong with them, so they understand why certain things are happening in their lives, what are, you know, the dynamics behind the unfolding physical changes, especially with the new body. A template course is going to be major update about this to assist people in this transition. So this is my main superpower, they said, is to translate these very refined frequencies, very refined language of light, and put it into a language form. I know a lot of people speak light language, and that's beautiful in a way, but we also need a translation so that there is a bridging process here. That's, you know, we have this bridging of the gap that's formulated. So this greater fabricated reality becomes more and more sustained and sustainable here in the physical realm. So there's a blending process. So this interaction here is what I most assist with and with people, so they can have a greater understanding of such purity of spirit and how to even put it into words. And that's why I think the most general response from people when they watch my videos or they read something I write is something they themselves were having difficulties putting into words. And usually the translation of the intricate fabric of the design that's behind this process, as you know, I talk about it as the seed of life principle of the grand design that's been actually put into our experience, created through the Elohim family of light. So they told me that because our group is not just participating in this process, or we have done it before, in the way in terms of the ascension, but they've actually told me we're the ones creating it. So because we are at the higher Kazal level, the ones who are creating this process as a pathway for the human counterparts of who we are to interact with and to shift with the process or within it. So because of that, it's my innate gift to just tap naturally into this and these resources. And they wanted me to stress specifically, like I shared in the first update, that it's important that people see this just as valuable as any other job on the planet, because it's not necessarily seen or validated as such, but it is a very important job. It's a very important mission. And without it, things with, everyone has an important part to play, this integral part we're here to do. So because of that, and they have been showing me to refine my purpose, and I've been wanting and willing to make this change and adjustment for a while now, but I haven't really stepped up. So they told me I must step up and let go of some of the things and ways I was sharing my knowledge and the knowledge of the group, so it can be more supported and sustained. And I wanted for a while now to work within a group who actually, people who actually want to learn about this, people who actually do want to support my work and do understand the meaning of reciprocal energy exchange. So because of that, I will shift my work and what I share to have less of a public view, like I did now with Instagram. I shared spirit updates and ascension messages, and just as I did on my Ascension blog. And I'm hardly using Facebook anymore, basically not. And I'm using now Patreon, because that's where people can support and they can choose, how much they would support. It's kind of similar to, if you have people who have subscription programs. It's not a typical subscription program, because it doesn't have like a value you subscribe to and then you get updates via email, and there's a page or a platform for that. But Patreon in itself has a beautiful platform, so people can choose their own amount and number, and you can actually direct different tiers, or what they're called, different narratives through which you want to speak to people, through which you want to share your material or your content, different values or whatever kind of degrees. So they've actually told me, besides what I'm already doing as a monthly channel message, just today I did a spirit message, and it's so beautifully encapsulated, and it's like circled around the whole topic that I've shared in the first Ascension update, which is us shifting in this primary narrative, and complete letting go of what we think the lightwork journey is about, so we can reach this point of synthesis. So there's this final great surrendering happening, and that's how they called it, the grand surrender. It's how they call it in the grand scheme of things, right? In the Great Hall of Records. They've told me. So with all of that, they have in addition told me that because I started these drawings with oil pastels and I like to do energy drawings, they've told me that I will also be doing a monthly channel drawing for the energies to also support you, because these energies are literally the translation of the language of light, but more through this design, through art. And this for me is like this creative process that also incorporates the inner creative child that does receive this through great magic, Sorry, I have to have some water. So because this is shifting, the reason of this is that the work gets more refined. It's going less public in terms of the general sharing, because they've told me this is now complete. They said all information that people who want to develop themselves and people who are volunteer souls is there. It's all in the videos. It's almost 900 videos or something. I don't know. I'm probably overreacting, but it was all together with, those few that I actually deleted, the first videos. But it's been a long journey for me of 8 years. It's been piling up, and it reached a point of culmination and synthesis now. And a part of this synthesis is always the next step. Okay, what's the next step? And this is the guidance I have been receiving. So they have shared with me that it's very important for people to commit to this. So instead of just taking it as something that's always there, it's always going to be there and for granted, because as you know, nothing is always just there or is going to be there. Even our planet, we don't know. You know, there's a lot of people who are losing their homes now at this time. There's people who are losing their structures, jobs, everything. So if we don't commit to creating something of greater value and we think it's just going to be there, we're not necessarily going to create or co-create a higher refined structure of something that would support us in this new. So because this is literally my job, except I don't have a physical boss employer, my employer is spirit, and I'm employee of spirit. It's the way it is, but it's still very much a work of constant effort and devotion. So I'm going to put my glasses on so that I'm going to see what I've been writing here in my notes. I hope you don't mind. I hope you can still see my eyes and the sincerity of what I'm sharing here with you, because I don't want it to be covered in any way. I do have some glare from the lightning, but we have poor lighting outside, so it's what I'm using. So before I begin, I really invite you to join the group. You know, the basic program or template to receive messages and channel guidance each month. A part of it will be also the channeled spirit drawing. And I will start this month in November because this is such a huge gateway month. You can join this at any time at your comfort or at your convenience. If you don't like it, drop up when you feel, you know, I'm not really a supporter of people, you know, coming, reading the content and just, you know, $5 signing off. That's not really fair to the people who are actually committing, you know, so please do consider that. But I want to build a group of people who would actually really want to exchange in an environment that really is meant to support through this sustainable way. You know, that's not just something you take for granted, because it's also, you put input there, you get more back. And then you, you know, it's always like, it's not how we see it that you give something, you get something back. Each time we give into the whole, we're actually creating an expansion of how much it's actually becoming available to us at large. So we're increasing the vessel altogether in this way. So when I'm doing like this, I feel a lot of heat in my hands. So it's kind of like amplifying all together already. And there is a few people already who joined after I started sharing more about that. So I'm really happy, because in the beginning I wasn't putting my energy and focus there, but after the recent guidance, they've been really nudging me to step up. And because I haven't received a lot of support just by being there, they've shown me, look, you got to do things a different way. So instead of, you know, how do you say that, wobble, you know, like a wallow in this feeling of, oh, you know, it's like, no, just create something new. And this is what they really wanted me to do. So we will be going much deeper, especially with the upcoming new year. I want to share more content, as well as the spirit messages I've been doing on Instagram. They will be now shared on Patreon. So those of you who have felt supported through these messages, sometimes they were weekly, sometimes daily. It really depends on how much I had to invest in, you know, where my focus was at large, because I had so many things coming in once. It was sometimes hard to follow it all, to follow through. But the things I will provide there will be, you know, will be like sustainable, which means they will also be cyclical and yet spiraling. They will come, you know, periodically in a certain way. Yeah, so if you want to join, I really invite you. I hope the circle will grow. I hope it will become something that I wanted to do for a while now, which means share an environment that supports me as well as I support all of you. It's not just, I don't want to be seen as someone who's just always there, appearing, popping up on a screen whenever, you know. I also want to be seen as, you know, for the work I put in, like how much value it has, how much contribution it has already made, because even just the comments alone for people that I've sometimes received have shown me that it is so. But I really want to have a more specific and rich with content, which means more refined work, not just like generally sharing. And I don't want to really repeat myself. So they have told me, you know, when there's an artist who has sung themselves out, I don't know if that term exists, but you actually literally pour out your heart in a certain level. You sing all your songs, your tunes the way you wanted to, and then it's time for maybe a full reinvention. And this is where I am now. So that's what they're showing me. So if you would like to still receive these messages, instead of being on Instagram and just like public platforms, it will now be on Patreon. So everything will gradually shift more towards there. The main general Ascension updates, I think, will still be on YouTube, just the overview, but we will go deeper there and also do selection readings, Ascension readings, spirit readings, all of these things there, especially with the upcoming new year. Want to get some rest during this holiday, coming up holiday season. So I know that's been a biggie. Thank you for sticking up, sticking through this. What do you say? We'll pull it through, right? So this galactic update, let's start with this, okay? Finally ready to start, is about the birth of the sovereign integral, which is the follow up as the birth of our new self, which is the self-birthing, birthed individual. So here in this video, we will go much deeper into the galactic history behind this whole process, because it is imperative now and necessary for a sovereign integral to understand not only the limited and presented Earth history that, you know, we have been receiving so much from the books, from the media and all of that, but a larger history of galactic proportions, which is galactic history that, you know, has been precipitating on this planet. It's been coming like little nudges, you know, little stages. And it's not all about just these conspiracy theories and all, but it's been different pieces that are starting to click together more and more. I know I have been a part of this process, galactic, volunteer souls, ET stuff, all of it for many years. And it's not just about the information, but how well it was all, you know, able to synthesize itself. Once you see the bigger picture, it all made perfect sense. So I don't know if you have been with me for that long. I think I've shared about this once, but there is this beautiful material I want to share with you, which is called the Wind Makers. Okay, wing, like her wings, and makers. And it's there's an official website as well. No one really knows its source. Okay, there are many different things that were kind of like in continuation, evolving around this project and how it was developed and who actually started speaking about it. And there's different interviews on the page with a specific person who presents as a certain someone. I don't want to go into that because it's not my material and I want to say more. You can find out all about on the webpage. But there was something like a finding place, okay, a point of location where I think a few hikers back in the, was it 70s or 80s, I don't know, but they actually found this gateway. They found a place, and it was actually like a time capsule. So they didn't know what it was, and I went through this professor. There were actually some students, and as you know, these organizations have links that directly gather information as it feeds into, you know, like if someone is in a university gets the information, they're literally going to get it in real time. So they're going to access what's coming through and what's shared. So they popped up there. They actually confiscated, I don't know if they confiscated it, but they took the whole place. They started doing their own research there. And there's a lot of secret societies and organizations that we don't even know about as humans. You know, it's not just the Illuminati and Rothschilds and these and that. It's just, it's so minimum. It's so flat on the surface when you go behind the whole narrative of this process and how much is present on our planet. But this was actually a time capsule by beings that are called the original or the root race, and that they have put that there as to encode us, so we could decode it and basically inform our DNA. There was different paintings and music and artwork that they took a lot of, you know, time to process that, to make little physical music out of it, and it's all available even on YouTube. There's beautiful music they put together as a part of this project. But I want to share this with you because it's going to link somehow with the topic, because I have recently listened to, studied all of these interviews. There's 5 interviews that are in written form as well as shared as a content that you can listen as an audio file on YouTube. And I really highly recommend it to all of you who are, you know, wanting to dig much deeper and who want to do the research of the roots. And I know it's coming through external knowledge, but still you will feel definitely a lot of these things, they're making sense. So even though there's a person who puts this narrative out there and shares in their own way and their own perspective and what they've experienced, because they were literally working on the spot in part of this project as a language translator and decoder. So basically it does link in with the topic, because they were showing me how much our galactic history now is ready to come to the forefront. And why am I saying this now? Especially because I talk to many who are volunteer soul types. What my guidance, what they have shown me is that volunteer souls are sent here to this planet, literally, as you know, there's a place, there's a setting where they call these locations time capsules. You know what a time capsule is, right? You're in a certain time area, you put something there and you kind of dig it in the dirt or put it somewhere to be unlocked at a later time, you know, just in divine synchronicity or something happens and there's a point of entry and suddenly an object or something is found, and specifically usually by a certain person who's meant to find it. So there's like mysterious conditions always surrounding those discoveries, but still it's always so meant to be, right? So what they've shared with me is that literally volunteer souls are living embodiments as time capsules, so that we, you know, through the Illumined Council guidance, I've received this in meditation. They've shared with me that I think I was by the Twin Lake, and suddenly it comes, they said, you are literally embodiment of these time capsules. So this was right after I was listening to the Wingmakers material. And I wanted to share more about the volunteer souls, and I've shared this recently on Instagram, but I know you don't all follow me there. And because our ascension is becoming so much more and expanded in a multidimensional sense, I wanted to somehow, or they wanted to somehow through me present this, you know, what is happening now as we're exiting out of this linear framework and moving into the multidimensional span of our consciousness. And because of that, we're leaving behind this enslaved, indoctrinated form of being and manipulation of the human experience, which, as you know, was deeply tempered with in order to never reach its higher divine potential. So this divine potential is of multidimensional cognition, and that's why I will be doing this free course on mastering our seership abilities. So to leave behind this old and outdated framework as human beings, we must first dissolve all inceptions of this distorted interface that was embedded in the human body framework, rendering it to function only through a limited set of abilities and opportunities. So even when you think about your soul gifts, as a part of this body matrix that was inherited, right, through our ancestry, the lineage, which goes way, way back when the first inception or the fallen template was established. You know, it kind of ran over the first Seed of Life program, which was, of course, the creation through the Elohim family of light. So this interception or this trajectory brought this like a lowering and densering, densering, that doesn't even exist, I know, the densening experience, right? The densification, right? That's the right word. So speaking like a real professor here. So this actually caused this huge distortion, right? So for us to dissolve all inceptions of this distorted interface, right, which was embedded in the body framework, rendering it to function through a limited set, right, of abilities and opportunities, we're now doing a very hard kind of work of pushing through, and we're going to talk about in this video how do we push through this. So if you want to go deeper, it will be more shared in the New Body template course, which will be a video course as always, of mastering yourself and your true powers and unlocking the embodiment potential of the new self born within you, the ascended you, as well as the seership free video. But we begin by first being aware of it, right? This is the first step, is being aware that this literally existed. So our bodies up until this point were kind of inherited, right? So if you are a part of my Patreon support team, when I do monthly spirit channel guidance, I just sit in my bed and for an hour I'm just writing it all up and channeling or more. I don't know how long it takes because I'm out of time. But in this month's guidance, it was so beautifully presented, this greater narrative that now wants to move through us, and this dissolving of this control. And even in the light worker community, right, people, beings, they're still holding so much entitlement to this position of a light worker, like what we need to do or achieve, and it's blocking the higher purpose. It's blocking the higher narrative of prime source divine design that wants to move through us. So if we don't do this, if we don't really entangle this within ourselves, we don't dissolve these discordant controlling factors that are playing out within our own bodies, because we've inherited this program of control. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back my previous Ascension update and Galactic update, where I share more about this, what this loss of control is about, and how the new Lumen child wants to charge forth now. And this is the process we must each do on our own. And for us, right, to do this, like I said, first is the awareness of it and a complete cognition of what is the old body and what is then the new body. And this will be all in the course. So this process left the human wandering and going around in circles for eons of time. So the Volunteer Soul Project, that's where they want to share more about this, was established in order to incorporate the high divine intelligence of crystalline multidimensional consciousness through human conduit embodiment. These are highly evolved, advanced beings who do not exist in any form of enslavement of energy entrainment in their pure soul state of integral sovereign. With their incarnation into human bodies, much more could be achieved from the inside than the outside. As this embodiment occurs, it plants the seed of the integral embodiment, which begins to grow and expand through each such individual embodiment, as well as a group collective. This project was created out of pure divine love and benevolent intervention within the human realm. This in no way means that something is done for others, because that cannot be. It simply means that each planted seed of sovereign embodiment that's free of any inbuilt slavery inception plants a seed that becomes a part of the collective human experience. The law of cosmic resonance is that when one can do, it can be done by all. And so these seeds will eventually grow and increase in their potency as divine gifts planted on earth. There are many who are already feeling the cracking down of all false illusions of control and duality, implants, and outdated human interfaces that render and control the experience, making it impossible to be self-created. So in the first Ascension update, we talked about what does it mean to be self-born and self-created. So only you are really moving and fueling your life experience, because people talk about you are the creator of your reality. Okay, it's a nice storyline, right? It's not a nice catchphrase. It's not just a word. We really have to claim what it means to be our own sovereign creators and create our reality. It's not just a given. From the prime seed it is, but because we have been incarnating for eons in time in these distorted, not really multi-operational functional bodies, we have actually had to work hard. So the human collective have to work hard to actually, get to that stage. So in the interviews, if you will listen to them, they actually say at one point, there was no human that actually created this in the body, this complete freedom out of this matrix rendering system. And now, as you know, and this came up in these Ascension channel guidance, is that because in these times of the procession, so much is opening up, there is so much greater and grander possibility for souls in these human bodies to achieve this. So volunteer souls are self-created without any outside influences, interferences, and agendas. They live within their own spirit liberation and have come to model that freedom for all. Listen again now, that does in no way mean that we don't go through the same difficult, conflicting situations of the duality once we enter into the human body. So this is where it gets kind of catchy, right? This is when it's kind of like, oh, it gets tricky. So for this process, what is mostly required is this remembrance process. The remembrance process is first triggered through sound, as you know, because everything is created through pure sound. So that's why in the discovery of these places, of these points, time capsules, I think they found or located one, and then they said more will appear as time unfolds, as it's destined to be so. They've also shared this music, which is the DNA encoding system to trigger the DNA unfolding process within us. But what they share with me is that the volunteer soul type, everything in your body resonates with this higher template. So you yourself are a decoder. That's just like you help to crack the system, but you literally just by being, you are reinforming life, and therefore you are reinventing things. They are being reinvented through you because you yourself are a living embodiment of what it means to be a time capsule. So it's like future meeting this present in order to disintegrate the past as it was. So that's kind of the narrative of this project. Not everyone will understand, but those of you who are of this group, you will be like, click, yes, that's me, that's why I'm here. Even like not necessarily knowing with the knowing, but knowing beyond, okay, just this feeling you have and you've had all your life that you're doing something vibrationally, and it's being, better said, it's being done through you. You are the working system for this. So this DNA activation required for the process, it occurs in the body and is triggered from within and integrated through the required external triggers. So for this process, the key thing and factor, as I always share, is the liberation of life force. So this belongs only to us, that the life force we are feeling, living, breathing out, it's only ours. So when people say like a catchphrase, you are your own creator, right? Now it's so popular to say that. Most people do not function as their own creators. Even those who think they do, there is still elements of creation as it is now being held vibration on this planet as a collective that influences our creations. So that's the catch here, right? So in Windmaker's material, and I've shared with you, you can do your own research. Most of you probably already did and know this. And it kind of sometimes finds you again. For me, many years ago, I've been reading this little pamphlet. It was a PDF file about the root race and the 7 super universes, and I really loved it. And then now it came back, and now the interviews came back, so I was ready for an upgrade to know and remember more. So this material about how it found me again was really beautiful because I wasn't even looking for it. Just one day something popped up on YouTube, and I'm like, I remember this. I'm just going to listen to it. And the funny thing, it was the interview number 5, which talked about these rendered human bodies as being called the human type 2.0, right? So I was like instantly like pulled in, right? I was sucked in. It was quite a long interview, but it had so much beauty in it, so many points of synthesis, like why things are a certain way and why we're actually here. So I really advise you to, maybe if you're interested, go look up that material about the root rays and the 7 super universes, and in Dr. Neruda interviews. There are 1 to 5. Later, I think there was more, but they were still questioning it, like whether it's still from the same being, because you know what happens, one person spills the information out and no one knows what happens to them, so then they start connecting to people via more like online, like let's say someone connects via email and says I have more information, and you're not sure whether that's still the same person or the same source. So they had little issues of that. So later many videos came as sequential following, stating, well, we don't know whether that's still real because the energy of the second reporter feels a little different. But you have to filter and discern what feels genuine and what feels has a narrative of truth. That's why for me it's always easy to watch anything, because I can easily see, yeah, that's true, that's fact, ooh, that's a little weird, so I'm just gonna leave it. But either way, you can at least look at the music and the paintings, because everything triggers the DNA memory. And I remember years back I was running and listening to the music. It has these different chambers, because in the Wingmaker projects there's like 1 to 24 chambers, or 23, I think 24. So officially, right, they first discovered 23, and they realized it's something that has to do with the human chromosomes, right, the number of the chromosomes. And in comparison to, I think it was it in apes with the 24th. So they kind of got the idea with the later found missing chamber, right, the 24th, that this is the missing link, and that it's talking to us either about something missing or something that will become integrated in our human experience, so that the DNA will expand and we're going to kind of shift in the way the human genome is basically structured. So they started to believe that these were messages from, like we call it, the future, right? And they're kind of here to interject with our now for a specific reason. But there were also many different things that were shared, and they are shared in those interviews, about the interjection of a specific race of beings who are called, I don't know what they're called right now, but it's a root, it's an experience that the root race shared. It's kind of like they gave little viewing perspective of what's occurring, right? What they're seeing from the timelines to occur. And when that information was shared, right, it was seen, it was read as an interjection of certain race of beings who are basically half machinery. They're actually beings who exist more as an artificial intelligence, and they're seeking to embed themselves in organic systems so they could also be soul carriers, because they actually lost that ability, or they never had it in the first place. So there was like this group that started so much, the effort. They wanted to have this effort to prevent this, right? So they started to develop what's called the BS technology, which is a blank slate technology. So usually you're looking up these different timelines where you can interject You know, they don't see time travel as you're physically going somewhere and da-da-da. That's like the old, very outdated concept. But so that you can travel with the consciousness, meet these points of interjection through your consciousness, influence, you know, like the nodes or the knots, right? Where these meet, these trajectories meet. And then you can influence them, and then you could get like data back into whether you have influenced it or not. So there was this group that hardly did anything else but just focus on this project alone because they really wanted to prevent this. But you know what? The higher wisdom about this is whether we can really prevent anything or not, or whether these messages are actually coming for us to be aware that we ourselves don't go that, you know, or don't follow up with that timeline that shows us, you know, what if these are just messages? What is also to happen to us? So I wanted to, in this video, because of this information I received and how it somehow links with the volunteer project they're showing me, because it is all connected. These projects are like, imagine different branches from one great branch, which is to illuminate once more the human genome and the human being so they could be living in joy and bliss and the harmony of what they were truly created for. So within that, there's many different agendas, as you know, some go against that. Some have their own desires and they're driven through their own egoic wills, and some belong to, you know, it's fractions of this greater project of life, this orchestration of the divine narrative that comes from prime source, which is seen as the unifying force of our life. So I want to share a higher perspective on events as triggers, like you know, these warnings and prophecies for disasters, alien invasions, and so on. So what they've showed me is that sometimes they're real, you know, when people do remote viewing and accessing these different timelines. But many times they're also designed to trigger a certain response within our physical makeup, because this begins to seek within us, right? We begin to seek certain solutions which would contribute to new inventions via consciousness expansion and cognition. So if that group starts to look up a certain new consciousness technology, right, that follows that through, and whether they're doing secretly first or whether they're sharing with others, as you know, primarily no one is doing it publicly, they're all doing it in secrecy first. And even that has its own reason, whether we want to see it or not. But the thing is that there are reasons to things we don't always see. So the more we dig in through, I want to know everything, instead of allowing ourselves to be guided to a higher narrative of what this message is about, right? So one example was this group, right, that they talk about, in this person, like the head of the group who's in search of this technology to prevent alien invasion, right, from these mechanic robotic race, was like, this in a way is already happening. If you haven't witnessed the artificial intelligence, the transhumanism, right, the becoming more and more like machines, and especially how it affects the younger generation. Now everyone is stick to their phones, like glued to their phone. It's almost like you're becoming one with your phone, and eventually you are the machine yourself. So in a way, what if these messages were share that it's not just an alien invasion, like physically, we always see things as physical, but what if these messages were showing us, look, there is like, you know, it's like a splitting of consciousness, which you can now see on the planet. It's happening. So one fraction is going organically, right, feeding themselves through their encoding of the light DNA, becoming more and more luminous. And the other fraction, because they also have to be sustained in order to survive, it's seeking more the pathway of being integrated in machinery, right, integrated in artificial technology. And I've shared this in the overall yearly update about the rise of the intelligence process through life force, and how one element is going into the rise of artificial intelligence as a part of it. So just see the commercial from Huawei, or what's it called? It's all about the AI writing notes to us and saying hello, and how it's now the new norm and all of that. But basically, transcending the human nature is almost like, it's almost like forgetting who we are at the root. So I believe that the root race, who are, like they say, us in the future, right? It's like elements of source creation that design DNA, that design DNA so that the experience can be felt, experience what we're doing here, why we're here, so that if we remember, we bring those elements called the root of existence through those aspects, so that we can integrate this missing link or the missing chromosome, so that we can not be, you know, enslaved in any way, like it was something that was taken from us. and it was literally hidden. Nothing can be taken, but it was hidden, so people had difficulty finding it. So therefore, the multi-dimensionally operating system and narrative that directly translates the unifying force of source could not be accessed. So our body structure stayed the same and very resilient, right? Not in a good way, but it's kind of like more through resistance. So they were kept at a certain density, and in the interviews they say, haven't you noticed that we're actually getting denser? And I know a lot of people won't agree because you're in the pathway, the trajectory of light. But if you look at the mass population, definitely you will look, there is truth and fact in this. The people are getting denser. They're getting more and more disconnected from what makes them one with source, what is source within them. It's almost a complete state of forgetfulness. And if you're not aware of this, right, there's such technologies that can manipulate just through vibration, and I'm sure most of you know it. So these towers, right, electrical towers and things like that, they're putting in, even in places like random villages like here where I live, which is quite weird, but there's these gross silver towers that is, it's like they stand there, I already feel creeped out. It's that disgusting. And it's like the natural existence and the seed of life template simultaneously existing or coexisting with this artificially created intelligence. And it's, you know, it's just there and it's just emanating waves. And people don't know that these waves that are being emanated have the ability to alter our brain frequencies and how we feel, whether we feel happy or whether we feel irritated, whether we feel like we want to argue, we want to be angry, we want to be, you know, like argumentative, things like that. So they're kind of driving us through these already embedded frequencies. So you have to raise, right, the intelligence of your body system to increase the language of light in proportion so that you actually don't become a victim of that. It's not just like, okay, I am my own sovereign, that's it. But we literally now have to become so smart about this process and our body and what we do with our body so that we don't give our life force away. And that's why for so many years now, I've been nudging you towards doing life force mastery so that you and no one else will claim your life force. And that is called the liberation of life force. And this process is a predecessing thing, right, that we need to get that missing link back. Okay, we do that chromosome thing the right way so that the seed of life can once again live through the human being. And this is what the new body template is, and I'm going to share all in the course. So one thing that also is a result of all of that is these different agendas, right? These different battling perspectives, these different ET fractions or sections. A lot of it also now, it's not just coming from what people call, well, the negative ones, they want their own thing. But this competition, this duality is also, as you can see, is present everywhere, even with people who claim themselves to be spiritual. You know, I don't have comments on YouTube for a reason because I don't have time for this, and my work is of high refined essence. And I really don't want to engage in that, who wants to share whatever they want. Because as you know, it's not for the people who are of love. I know these people have only good things to say. But there's the majority of that is not these people. Because, you know, the majority, you know what it is, and especially these robotically created drones that are not just up there, but also they're in computer mechanisms, and some of them are not even of human origin. Some of them are just machine and bots and programs that are doing these things. So we don't want that, right? So they're showing me that this, instead of this competition, which is present in the so-called spiritual circles too, right? Who's a better guide? Who's a better teacher? Do this, or this teacher's doing that, that teacher's doing that. It's like, you know, that's the ego consciousness. So instead of that, we ourselves need to do the work and shift into cooperation between various fractions and beings. Because if we see it like negative influences from ETs and these beings and those beings, the work is ours. The work is whether we are within ourselves still carrying these duality fed programs. So an example would be that's spiritual or that's not spiritual, or comparison, right? Projections. Instead of being who we are as facets of the whole and each unique. Like lately or recently, someone made a comment and I'm sorry, I laughed about it because it's that silly to me. I don't mean in any way to be offensive to anyone, but the comment was like that the person watched this video, it's like entrancement from someone who did this meditation via channeling hypnotic states so people could become enlightened through theta waves, and I should do the same thing because I have a nice voice. And I'm like, what? First of all, no one knows my purpose. No one tells me what to do. I have an employer, his spirit. And next thing here is like, how do people even think? Okay, someone does that, you should do it too. That's comparison. You see, it's like thinking spirituality is a certain way, a certain thing that you have to offer, so we're supposed to do that. And the last thing they want to share through me about this is that no one can offer humans a certain wave and let them become enlightened and help them to be enlightened. We're actually not here to do that. We can't do that. I can't help anyone to become enlightened, but only within myself. I have a certain frequency that can unlock the potential within. And these waves, right, the theta waves, alpha, whatever kind of waves, they're already there. You don't need someone to kind of, kind of enhance that process for you. Because these waves are there, like the cosmic rays are always there. They're universally linked to all life. But whether you receive them or not is not dependent upon whether someone provides you that service. It's whether you're open up to receive. So that's the reason why I don't do such things, because that would be rather disempowering to the collective process of ascension from within to without. So this cooperation between various factions, like one example they're giving me is the White Brotherhood. It's like many different projects, but they all feed the one. They all feed from the one for the creatrix design. So instead of feeding separate agendas via separation mentality and self-service, which is also mirrored in the hiding information from the rest of the public, sometimes that can be good because people are not ready. But in most cases, sharing that can come in divine timing is also a part of our human experience, and humanity deserves to start moving ahead, not only certain factions of humanity. And like it was shared in the interview, that some of these organizations have so much money that money is not even a consideration to them anymore. It's not even an issue. It's like, we're not doing this for money. We're doing this to control how the planetary cycles go and what develops as a mass evolution the way we decided to be. And that's against the control. And no matter whether that's perceived as evil or not, it is still in its own way, it's controlled. It's by someone thinking they're doing the right thing. And even if it's like for the purpose of preventing this and that, it's still controlled. So the best thing we can do, right, is to know within ourselves, to become these divine integral sovereigns, to become this birthing point of entry for higher consciousness, that anything, whatever it is on the outside, right, cannot influence that. So this divine timing and when guidance is that consciousness is ready to receive is important, instead of hiding that information for all time being all together. Okay, so in interview 5, I want to share with you, it's kind of, sometimes it's a little provocative, and goes much deeper into the creation of the human bodies via the race called the Anunnaki beings. The Anu being is the god for that race. There's also the mentioning of Marduk and the story playing out through Enki and Lil. It's a typical classical story between Enki and Lil of the good versus bad. Okay, one of them is goody, one of them is baddie, right? It's like this game being played. And I want to present you higher perspective here, right? Because a lot of these concepts are also archetypal here, which means that the fall of grace that really actually has its root cause in these gods that separated themselves from the experience of love, right? Which is, you don't create through control, you create through love. And so this separation consciousness, which is, I am not my source. I don't create through my source. I create in my own way. This was projected into the human fall of consciousness because they have, anyone who creates a certain type of body or works to create a certain type of DNA so it can function, like we say, this organic biological form, this means that what they put this into it is they put aspects of themselves, because you cannot create anything, it's like not created through you. So when we have been told this through the Bible and the story of the fall and the good and evil and the Garden of Eden, this was basically was galactic, was in the wars, right? Was in this level. So humans have many times felt like this guilt, like, ooh, we've done this when we were baddies, okay, but this was just like a projection of this. So we have been incepted with this idea of original sin, which was, again, it's another inception. So you can wake up to the fact that you were birthed primarily through the seed of life, which is love. So in this story, right, in this version, Anu in the Bible was created like human vessels and human beings, not beings, but the vessels. That's the difference. Because human beings were created through the primary source narrative. So it was created through the image and likeness. So what they have been experiencing themselves was kind of energetically transferred and translated through the DNA. So it was creating through their own consciousness extensions, and all of their traits went into the human experience via an energetic infusion. And this was to rewrite the source code for the primary human source as light beings and bodies that reflected that immaculate design in conception. So it was a story moving from conception to inception. And I don't use the word inception in a light way, especially not in a very light, kind of hearted way. So the very way of human genesis changed. The way human genesis was originally designed changed, but it was only a rewrite, as you cannot rewrite the primary seed, and that remains at the core. So humanity is now at this precipice, those who are ready to unveil what the core is. And remembering that the Bible is actually a story, and that much of that story, especially with the first part, I think the Old Testament speaks a lot about these ET infiltrations and invasions that actually, humans are just the side players and the side watchers that basically kind of at a certain level agree to participate in this game as well, because there was a point of merging that was designed in this process. So these beings could, just as much as the humans are learning through this interjection process, these demigods are doing the same way. So there's, behind it all, remember, there's a unifying source aspect, which is that all eventually returns to love and origin of its creation. But this, what's written in the Bible, and it's mentioned as gods, and it's even shared in the interview, is not God as prime source, creator, prime designer of life, but more like the gods that went out and created their own forms. And in many ways, these were controlled. They were put in a certain environment which you can control. So in controlled environment, see what can do, how they can do it. Like the human body type 1.0 was erased through the flood, as you know, because these beings said, "Ooh, we put too much in our little abilities into it. We don't want them to go too much our way." So they eliminated the whole project, as you know, if you were left, because the prophet got vision and knew they have to sustain a few life forms. So that's the whole story. And so much of this has been going on, and why I'm sharing all of this is, for us now, we are here to see the interwoven design, which leads us now into the point of synthesis, because that's where the Lightworker community is now at, if they really want to step up and they want to be part of this greater surrendering process. So at this time, the project and decree of light is to liberate those aspects of inception within this current framework, especially for those soul beings who are trapped here in this realm as descendants of the archangelics. I think Jim Self has a beautiful narrative on YouTube. It's called The Creation Story, something like that. And he explains this fallen story more as a concept and ideology from a higher archangelic perspective. And he mentioned the same thing, that why there's so much cooperation now with the light, and why light is so much moving here on earth, is because so many who have forgotten who they are at the root level are still trapped in this matrix, so they can't reach out and expand into the higher potentialities of life, where they of course simultaneously exist. But this is in a natural way the evolution of life, which has become somehow limited and restrained in what it truly is not. And it's okay, it's an experience, but even that is temporary. So at a certain point, there will be again this interjection of light, which I always call it the divine intervention, divine initiative, right? So because of this, the fall story is also archetypal, and truth, of course, varies at each level of vibration. So there's not just one reality and truth. Okay, so we say, oh, from this perspective, the Anu is doing this, or the Anunnaki have this mission. And this is kind of their narrative, but it's not so limited. And someone on the internet would write a source, something they channel, something they receive. The reason why I share these videos from a greater perspective is that this all links in with so many facets that once you get that, you will be closer to the truth than anyone who's trying to dig up the information and all of these different facets. Because if you get too much into one piece of the equation, you will lose the overseeing sight, right? That oversees everything. So one example they gave me was the moon. Some people saying, oh, it's just a false artificial satellite, right? Physically. And some people would say, no, the moon is a beautiful deity through which we can illuminate ourselves. And we have these moon cycles and how it influences our planet and how we ourselves are being influenced, right? So they say it's a beautiful celestial object through which we live out our earthly cycles as we are influenced by them in our lives. So which one is true? And Spirit says, as always, it's not this or that, it's both. So it depends on the consciousness that's viewing that. Remember, all life in its physical expression is made up of many layers of consciousness, so that is the underlying force of all life. We have to find our own resonance within traveling all of these layers and generating synthesis into Christ consciousness. And basically, right, that's where we are here. Let me see how much I have left. I think so much. Oh, this is so long. Oh gosh, what was I doing? I told you I was writing in bed for like 9 hours. I better don't look. I just go with the flow. I have writings and they tell you what I also make up as I go along the way. So now with so much information, right, that's coming out, we have extremes like when people are going to fanaticism, other people are going to complete ignorance, and only a few are finding that middle ground of benevolence and seeing like, okay, there's so many things I don't know about, but what if I can be a space of not knowing and know within that not knowing, and don't pretend that I understand everything, because the mind can understand or put everything together like all these pieces, but that I can act as a spiritual glue, as that, point of synthesis that doesn't see anything excluded from the rest. And this is now the main theme of this, and this is the integral sovereign. You don't judge things. You basically know your standpoint. You know your point of origin. You know what you're anchoring here. And that's why we have to be so very careful how we view this all to find the integrative point of synthesis. So some move into the extremes of ignorance, veils of illusion. Some are going to fanaticism, which is seeing but not seeing really clearly, and seeing within only limited narrative and framework, right? It's like just this, right? And you become so obsessed with it. And then also the service to truth, which requires the view of all angles, all facts, factors, variations, experiences, and seeing how behind it all is the prime source as the first source narrative. And Christ consciousness is allowing ourselves to become the benevolent and pure vessel for that narrative. One example is the many things that were shared in the Wingmakers interviews. Like the later editions and renditions, like I told you, they were like, oh, is that true? Is it false? Is another person? Did they hijack the project? Who's now speaking through? And they were like, again, you see, we can get so mashed up into all of this, right? Is it true? Is it false? And who's behind it all? So the questions will always arise, right? Of course. But what we need right now is really, really feel the feeling. Does that make me feel like I'm expanding? Not like, whoo, I'm going up. No, like expanding. The heart is reaching higher levels of being able to direct the cosmic heart guidance. And this is how it channels through us. Like someone, right, recently told me, it was a physical person who's not into any spirituality, but we were talking and they said, I don't want to go deeper into things too much because that will only bring up more questions, and I don't want that, and I don't want to just get confused because they want to do their physical stuff all the time and they're so in it, right? So this is how the majority of the humans whose DNA has been deeply manipulated and kept them in this, just the physicality of life, still thinks so completely in non-awareness of their divinity and knowing Earth and its galactic history and how Earth fits into this galactic history narrative. So one cannot know Earth history without actually knowing galactic origin and history as well, for it's all intertwined. So when we were learning about the history on Earth, the reason why it's false is because it doesn't include the larger perspective. It's just so limited, therefore it's not correct in so many ways. So volunteer souls open gateways into such realms of consciousness that are not always visible to the seeing eye at first. We have to go deeper. We are here to decode information that was locked in, primarily in order to prevent further development and evolution. That was the cause of this, right? Infiltration. And then we are to encode it, this encoding of the living life structure, so that the galactic and living Earth library can know itself at the causal level again. And that's the primary mission. That is the root level of itself, like the root race represents. That's why it's called the root race. And I told you in the Ascension update, it's all about the roots now. It's all is the main theme. So hence the time capsules, the chambers, paintings, discs, music, all of that. And what we ourselves are also channeling as each of us as vessels. And that's why they told me I have to do also channel spirit drawing, because it also unlocked DNA much more than just the words. So that when I offer this guidance via Patreon, it will be all of the facets, right? So we get the writing cover, we have the light grid, it speaks through the language, certain stones, crystals, and then the narrative that speaks through pure art, which is just channel light, liquid light. So this is to reveal our true potential and why and how we're here to create, not through technology alone, but developing inward technologies at first so that our inner spiritual technology can develop and naturally cause the rise of organic consciousness, which is only our own extension, not a standalone idea, right? An example would be an organic ET craft without beings. So when humans find these crafts, they're like, where did the beings go? They died, something happened, they disintegrated by coming to the planet. They find it like it's a leftover, right? Technology, thinking that these beings left, when in fact it's just a totally different frequency, nature, and structure. And we find just the denser element of it. So it's like we don't know. Their consciousness is embedded. So if the vehicle kind of fails and it's kind of falling on Earth, it's like that's just that. But the consciousness was there in it. And the consciousness does not fail. So no one leaves or goes anywhere. And we don't understand that because until we are multidimensional, not just here, but the heart opens the gateway to multidimensionality, which starts to gradually translate even to our thinking process, because the cognition of the multidimensional process cannot be fed through the limited channels which we now have with the duality-based mind, because the bodies were these limited human bodies as a point of inception were created so that the galactic heart, as channeling directly from the galactic core, could not function optimally, right, and primarily. So now with this activation of this and our higher cosmic Christ heart, we're going to eventually and gradually build up higher highways of information knowledge as well, which is what it's called, the moving into the Aquarius age that will become available. But first we must do the hard thing, right? So hence, right, because of this, we create everything by aligning with our core, the prime source origin, and develop from it by becoming a pure reflection of source consciousness, so our divine intelligence naturally grows, not artificially, via AI, which is artificial intelligence. So the elite rulers want to offer this transhumanism agenda in which the human and machine consciousness are merged. It's like, so let's go back to the invasion, right, of these so-called mechanic beings. It's not like really happening in that way because this timeline simply is, and we cannot prevent it or anything. And that's what they were showing me. This message is coming through not about us to prevent something, but to expand in our consciousness. So when we work in developing something to prevent something, we're already missing the point. That's the truth here. So something that's meant to play out will play out. And when the consciousness expands, you're already shifting the timeline naturally because you've expanded, and maybe you move beyond the point of needing that as a trigger point for you to have an experience. So we can only rise up in truth, raise our consciousness, and embody the integral sovereign within, and not give in to these perspectives and propositions, right? They're saying, oh, this will happen, and that's why you need to do this. Okay, so get these chips, so you'll be on the level, right? Okay, so if I want to be prepared when these beings come, I need to rise up to their level. Maybe I become mechanical myself. Sorry, I'm joking here. I have to, because this cannot just be seen so seriously, what they're showing me. It's like we have to laugh about it as well. The humor points to our enlightened sovereignty. So the 2018, 19, and 20, up to the 22 points, in this year's transition years brings a transition of rise of AI. You're already seeing it now, and it's inevitable because it's just a point of that trajectory, which for some reason we're not aware of it at large, but it's occurring. So because it's occurring, it's here. It's like we can't prevent it or stop it, but we have to choose where we are. It's as simple as that. So this is like, again, an inbred proposal, and it's just another upgrade to their desired human interface. So I told you, and if you listen to the interviews with that being, is human 1.0 was destroyed on purpose by the floods, right? We need to do a new one, and the version 2.0, which now they want to make into a 3.0, which is now this transhuman, right? This transhuman agenda is present, as you can see it, it's everywhere. You only have to wake up your eyes, and I don't even look at the internet stories and watch the news, but I know it. You see one thing and it leads to the next, and it's all connected. So you see one thing, you know it all. But for us, you know, to transcend ourselves, right? Our gender, it's already happening, as you can see, with pushing for transgender, allowing all that to be seen as the norm. It's just like, just, you don't like it, just change your gender, right? Just chop things off, just change your gender, right? So the main pattern behind this, it's really deeply hidden, and they're trying to mask it as, hey, don't go against human rights. If they want to do them, let them do it. Are you against? So they're actually trying to show the people who are not going for that as being the judgy ones. But the narrative behind this is, and this is the things you will only see with mastership, seership, sorry, abilities, sovereign seership. I'm like tongue-tied altogether. So the narrative, if you can go and tap into the energy, which I did, I always do, is if you can change your vital body parts, you can do anything else. That's what leads to next. Okay, body parts, one thing, and you're literally going to change your genome again to such a point that you're not just going to be a human 2.0, but you're going to be a 3.0, 3PO, right? 3PO. So what's that? It's Star Wars, right? It's a robot. So these are the implications here. And sometimes for people it can be scary, so they don't want to listen or see what's happening. You got to face the facts. It is what it is. So these are the implications, and it's scary and off-putting as it might sound. Especially for those of us who are nature and divine lovers of life. It's like, it's just like it is. And as you know, most of my viewers are nature lovers, and they also connect to me in that way, and fairy lovers. And what they're showing me is because they're also descendants from the Elohim race, which is created through the natural aspect, so co-created alongside with the way the nature was developing, because it was all one angelic creation. So this group of angelic creators with the prime source code embedded, and it's pro-life. And we're seeing now this degradation of life, and we care so deeply, right? Oh, so much. So the opposing ones who are against this, against life, they don't really mind the degradation of the environment issues, and so because they're prone to recreating everything synthetically and artificially, like it was already once so in Atlantis. There's one book that exists, I think it's even in Slovene language as well. My mother read it once, and this woman wrote her experience as she remembered in a past life from Atlantis. She said that in the end days, it was all artificially built. Everything was like, even the trees and everything was like no longer from nature. They wanted to recreate nature. So going back to the wingmakers, right? The interviews were these Atlanteans, right, who were living on Earth. They were supposed to be living, and somehow there was an interjection with these Anunnaki beings, so they embraced them, and they had this gold mining agendas. That was in interviews. That's why I'm just recapping for those of you who I'm doing your work, so you don't get to go so deep in it if you don't have the time or something. Maybe if you are living your family life to the fullest, and already my videos are so long you don't have time to watch something else. So I'm going to do a short recap. So here, basically later, right, because they didn't know what's going to happen, they didn't have the eyes to see, so later these very beings have entrapped them in these manufactured or cloned, which densified bodies. They call them the monkey bodies, right? They were like these, they went from these highly evolved Atlantean beings, and they were kind of trapped in these bodies when they start to reincarnate, so they could work for them and their agendas, and themselves actually crowning themselves as rulers. Since the bodies were so dense, it was difficult for them to liberate themselves while in the net experience, which is the matrix, it's the net. And according to the wingmakers, no one has ever done so on the planet Earth to truly transcend the Earth, right, to the body ascension, except the incoming avatar beings who are avatars already, which means they come here as a divine intervention points to show humanity how it's done and that it can be done. But as you know, in many ways, unfortunately, they were chased, persecuted, ridiculed, kind of like. So what they shared in the video is that Jeshua, as a master being who's also an interjection point and a divine dispensation of life, he was also supposed to be the only avatar being or master who Lord Marduk actually allowed, so that he could later develop a false religion and ideology around him and distort his genuine teachings and messages which we already know is true. So that's why I proposed to you the Joshua channeling book, because it truly has the true heart wisdom and what we must do to get to the point of Christ consciousness to keep moving forward. So this distortion primarily came through the false heaven and hell, the afterlife hierarchies, right? The basically points of inception called archons, the fake ascended masters, so humans could not walk into their own mastery. So if any master presents themselves as your master, not showing you your own mastery, you gotta put it to the question mark. And this is where most new agers fail, because automatically something tells them, I'm a master, I can do this and that. Ooh, wow, you can do this and that. Ooh, it's the same way as the gods, right? The lesser gods coming to earth, they could perform a few tricks because they simply knew the technology, right? They knew the laws of mechanics and metaphysical workings. They presented this and humans were like enchanted, so they believed they must be gods because they themselves didn't have disabilities, right? So no one tells anyone, right? Because we have this idea that later in the New Age it was conceptualization and all sorts of inceptions like ET savers and so on, right? This is what I was going at. So no one can tell anyone how this is done within their own body template. This is why no master can present themselves as your master, right? Or like people who follow these Christian traditions through being saved by the Christ, like no one can save you. Like the Christ gives me his essence of life so I can live my own in divinity. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way once you understand the narrative of source. Everything is unified, it's all one, but no one can live like through the essence of another because the essences are already one. They're already unified. So they're just selling crap, people, right? This way, via the victim savior mentality. And these channelings, which many of them have major deceptions with them, in terms of only offering a certain portion of what's truly happening, but then leaving the rest, or people promising there will be an alien invasion which will save everyone or everything, and people saying no, there will be an invasion for the bad. It's like, what would we even do with that if we ourselves are not prepared from within? Nothing. Nothing. What does that information have to do with us if we're not prepared from within? Nothing, right? So this is where it gets really, again, it gets tricky, right? So I've talked about this for all these years, and I'm doing a synthesis of this in this video because I'm going to be shifting in my work. So I wanted to do this, like, this offering as a synthesis point of the inception and how to move beyond it. And it will be deepened with the Mastership program free course. So this is all planned, so they can be placed in the human subconscious template via the astral planes of their making, where they are the main creators within the net. This is like in the Matrix movie, right? But it cannot be done to a sovereign, and this is where people get fears if they hear about these things. But if you're a sovereign, if you choose, and you say, I will create my own reality, first of all, for me to do that, I have to create from my own body. It's not body that belongs to, I don't know, a lineage of bodies that were kind of carriers of this distorted crap. No. Yes, we have come into this body to bring the inner salvation, the inner liberation. So this cannot continue, and it ends with us. When you do this within yourself, you change the whole DNA lineage. If you have children, the children after you will not have to do this work. That's the beautiful artwork of this being done within. Once you create from yourself, like I shared before, from the source reflection, the source mirroring program, whatever you create from your own core template has the same narrative, which means you're passing on the codes of purity, you're passing on the codes of the immaculate design and conception. So you're birthing liberated forms, the already ascended forms. So this is how we get to shift. This is how we get to bring the energy of liberation and salvation, not saving anyone else outside of us. It doesn't exist. Why do you think nothing hasn't changed crucially already? It's because it's not allowed for something or someone outside to do that. It hinders the overall evolution process. It was done before, and now it's a karmic retribution for those who have tried to save on the outside or portray themselves as savers. They themselves now had to incarnate also in human bodies to play that role out of the victim, so they could see this from both perspectives. So once they could truly be the middle work, the middle ground, like we are now at this time. We all have the ability to be that, to be the light, the mediators, right? The Christed beings. So, as I've shared, when we choose, it cannot be done to a sovereign integral being who has claimed their source. So all you have to do is wake up and do the claiming, reclaiming of the self process, become self-born, and become the new integral sovereign. This means not waking up partially, but in truth and penetrating every layer of illusion, which means even, I don't know, what we say sometimes, oh, this is Christ-like consciousness. Remember this, even Christ-like consciousness can be sold to a human being via lots of distorted concepts, which Christ-like consciousness truly is not. You have to be so observant and careful. And a younger soul being type can easily fall for such traps because they don't have so much experience. Like back in those days, right? They couldn't tell that this could happen to them and the bodies would get hijacked in a way. It's like, what? But somehow anything that's happening is allowed for that time being, for that reason. So an aware one will refine their marks of seership and always be out on the lookout. And that's what I'm going to help you with in the course. So again, how to tell what's right, wrong, and to discern, and what does it really matter, right? Why? This is the question here. At this time, a lot is at stake, and so much depends on the choices of the selected few. This is the message of Spirit now. So those who are more aware at present of the bigger picture and plan. An example, master teachings of being totally empty, egoless, all of that, right? That's just part one. That's part one for us to do. So as the lower mind, which is their design, it's the design of the human 2.0, we sometimes say, oh, the mind is like this, stop the mind, transcend the mind, whatever. But first you have to know the origin of the mind, and this is it. Knowing the galactic history, knowing the source of the mind. So the higher understanding, the divine mind, is a creatrix design, but the lower mind, right, the monkey mind, the subconsciously implanted mind is an inception. So that's the second part. So first is to become like in this state. So you can see where this state as a construct, right, as their design truly comes from. So the higher mind is the divine intelligent self, but part two is then seeing the bigger galactic picture and story behind all of this. One example of such a bigger picture would be understanding why, one example, the Anunnaki lords do what they do and utilize humans as their resources. So what they, from my group, an Illumined group, they've shared with me is that they were once banned from experiencing physicality in this way themselves because they went into separation, which means as a creator gods, which they were creating without their prime source spark. This goes back to the creation story. And in the Illumined Creation Mastery course, which is a 13-octave synthesis course on my self-mastery page, I explained this as well, much in deeper view. So, and as they use this human vessel experience now as the intermediary experience, as their human interface, that's how they're now experiencing humanity. And in a way, they're allowed so they can learn from the experience. So all creator gods use prime source lights to create. And so they can create godlike extensions of their own creator consciousness, which become like their children. And those who do not create through prime source light can create anything but the human extensions. Hence, they can have immense intellect and create machine-like, which is artificially created consciousness, but only divine love can recreate itself as love, which is at the core level. So when I wrote this, afterwards I watched later parts of the interview, and this Dr. Neruda shared the same thing, because he was asked about the Luciferian agenda and rebellion, and he said it's actually also archetypal, right? How it pinpoints to these aspects that said, no, we want angelics also being like bred or incarnated in the human bodies, and the root race said, no, we can't do that, because they already proceeded, they saw that it would not be inequality. Somehow it wouldn't go. And they were kind of like, they said, no, we want our own agenda to work. So they went separately, they went against that. So in a way, this was banned. So the life forms they developed were this artificial consciousness, which now in the interview, they said it's exactly the machine type consciousness, which they saw infiltrating the human consciousness now living on this planet. And it was prophesized, I think, for 2012 or 11 or 13, somehow around this time, also the time of this procession, right? And the funny thing is that we might have not experienced this physically, right? So where's the intervention? The ships landed or something. But it's, again, it's a state of consciousness. Look what's happening. It is already happening with this AI on the rise. So how can you say we've stopped something? We couldn't prevent it. unless we really understand that within ourselves we have to rise up, we have to build these new body templates, we have to become self-born, we have to be the sovereign again. And now it's only small numbers, those of us who are time capsule machines, or not machines, I'm just kidding, but organic machines in a way. Basically we're the product of love, but we have to do this work. So for us it's difficult because we have to transcend any program that's a part of this 2.0 design. And it's kind of like, oh, sometimes it's so challenging because you literally see it, it's not you, but it still flows through you. And you're like, you can get upset, you can get angry about it, but at the same time, you got to do the work. You got to meet those energies like master teachings show you, like meet every energy within yourself. Meet every aspect, every feeling, every emotion, meet it within yourself. This is how you bring things back through love, not denying and pushing aside. So ultimately, right, going back to this greater story, the human is not their offspring or their direct creation. It's of the Elohim consciousness or the central race, greater God, prime source, whatever you call it, right? But they themselves were only seeking to merge with them as a part of their own learning cycle and experience, which you can find more deeply explained in Barbara Hand Clow's books called The Mind Chronicles, book 1, 2, and 3. Super books. I read them all this year, throughout the year, kind of slowly because they're huge. Best read I ever did. Best memory code unlocked ever. So the human cycle of growing up and becoming sovereign as well is interwoven in this process. So it's like meeting energies from both angles, right? So it was about the merging of human and machine consciousness. Now this, I'm talking about the AI, no longer about the mentioned, sorry, there's so much to talk about, and sometimes I hope I present it the right way so you don't get confused. Talking about, right, the creation of the human experience. But now this happening with the rise of AI is about the merging of the human and machine consciousness so that these separate inorganic robotic forms could one day come back into its own fallen creation realization. So when it was shared in that interview, like they want to come because they're seeking a planet with organic life so they can like embed themselves in the system. They themselves can enhance the way they are to become also soul carriers because now they couldn't. So they were kind of seeking that. It's like it was built in their own narrative, their own code, right? So here, from a greater design, why things are allowed is that there could be once a point of interjection that would bring things back to the core origin. So yeah, back from its own fallen creation realization. So if anyone on a human level chooses that as their path in this life and beyond, like you totally give yourself to this path of AI, basically, in a way, you're serving a purpose because you're guided in that way. We can say, wow, they're entraining us, they're doing this, they're forcing us. No one can actually force anyone. That's the biggest truth. So perhaps these humans have soul agreements with the mechanics or these beings of AI, as also David Wilcock, I think, speaks about the problem of such beings in the mechanic universes, Jim Self as well, in this story of creation, because he mentions that a lot of the universes also are built, that the machine technology is just like this mechanic consciousness or artificial consciousness like drives, and some of like the whole universes became entrenched like this because they were created through this way. So we know both in creation. So that which mimicked the pure resonance of source and the unifying force of all life, and that which went opposite. In itself, prime narrative has no opposition. But as life began to move further and further into creation, that's where opposition started, not at the prime source narrative level. There is no opposition, as you know, in that level. So our basic job here, and the reason why I'm sharing all that and how it relates to my previous galactic updates of releasing that control, because as much as you would say, oh, I have nothing to do with that because I'm a benevolent being, I'm a benevolent human, I'm all about Christ, the consciousness, la 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 la, yada yada yada, right? I'm not Jewish, but I just like to say these things, it's funny, yada yada yada, right? We all play this part. It's how it is. We're a part of everything because, like I said, at the prime level, when you remember yourself as source, you also, as source, have no opposition. So you can be at this Christed level, a meeting point where all these seeming external oppositions can meet. And that's what Christed consciousness and what for me truly it represents. So for us, when we do this own thing here, through here, right, is we're surrendering all control in our human body experience. And we surrender this infiltrating ET aspect that embedded itself within it, and so that we liberate the human divine child within. Go back to the previous updates where I talked about this process. So we, as a part of this process, cannot pass judgment of this process, how it goes, how it develops. Ooh, we don't want to see that, it's scary. Passing judgment is planting seeds of non-understanding, but we want to be planting seeds of understanding. And that's true mastery. That's true mastering of our seership abilities. So, however, we must carefully choose, though, and walk our own path. Knowing truth brings the power of choice. When you are aligned with truth, it will always bring a power of choice. Illusions, lies, never do. You feel powerless, you feel limited in your abilities, and that's when you know, oh, I'm not aligned with the core. Just go back into the nature. Your galactic heart resonance speaks to your heart. The galactic core moves through you. So we cannot prevent anything, as that is fear consciousness that does not understand the bigger picture playing out. And knowing divine plan is only possible via the integral, sovereign, and self-birthing, life-giving consciousness which each being must create within themselves first. That's why we're here. You know the song from Enigma, which sings like, that's why we are here. You know, it's like we traveled far from, la la. I don't know, this always reminds me of it could be a theme for Volunteer Souls. I don't know the title right now, but it's a beautiful song. And I believe that there's a few of us who can see kind of like past this, what's happening just here in this circle. We can see circles within circles and circles, and that's what it's called to have marks of seership. And I'm going to guide you more into that perspective in the free course, which means that we're moving from partial human, ET, star being, I'm this, I'm that, you know, all that partial truth into a unified divine plan that's beyond personal agendas. And it unifies all of it, right? I'm giving you one example. I was also shared there. One example was the Pleiadian consciousness, which speaks to Barbara Marciniak, and they're all about this organic development, rise up of your sexuality, your liberation of life force, go back to nature, bring natural design, bring natural creations, be organic in the way you live, right? And it's away from artificial technology, machines, just go away from it all, and into organic living systems. And on the other hand, you have beings who are presenting everything more as technological in nature. So again, see, you can say Pleiadian is not enough because there's also fractions of that also have their own experience, but they're trying to project it. But the reason why they're saying is they're sharing these messages is because they themselves, from the future standpoint, right, the future selves, are moving this. They're moving through time, which means they're bending time and space, which is the ability of time travel once it's seen from the quantum level, is you can break through the points that feel like they're points of limitation, which means at that point, that type of consciousness has a message to share, which means don't prevent this, but develop yourselves in the now, because at the same time, you are dissolving this, what was in the past, means you're already changing the future. And that's why this now, what we're doing now is so important. And even when we have doubts, what are we here? What am I even doing? Remember, that's why we are here. Enigma, the song kind of plays in my head now. So the conclusion of all this is that when we can connect all of these dots and missing links from within through our own unifying consciousness, we're then ready to embody Christ consciousness in a multifaceted, multidimensional way. Right? Now, the next step will be the Marks of Seership and Multidimensional Stellar Cognition course. It's all here. I want to wrap this up before I say it's a wrap with this message from the Lightworker Oracle. I want to mix the serious with the fun and I want to have little encouragement from the team of light, from the Lumen Council. Let's see, sorry, my glasses are kind of slippery because I have oily skin, like slipping off. So I keep doing this like a grandma, like an old lady. Well, part of me is grandmother as well. So I'm just as young as I'm old. And I think with this headband, I look like a grandma even more. So I like it. Oh, no, not the message yet. Has to be just one. Can we please get a divine narrative to help us to receive a message of light that would be the overseeing perspective of this theme today, which was maybe heavy a little bit. I hope I presented it with much lightness of spirit that I could. Got a little tongue-tied along the process, along the way. I've had hours of doing things, and sometimes it's challenging to speak through the human vessel 2.0. I'm not going to be either 2.0, I'm not going to be 3.0, I will be simply human 0. Yeah, that's a message. Create your 0 points instead of being something that someone else wants to shape you into. If that's their choice, like, let them shape themselves into that. We let them try out if they want to. And those who want to follow up with that, maybe they're a part of that process, you know, maybe they're part of that consciousness that now is having that experience in a human form and wants to be a part of what they've created as an AI. Maybe they need that. Maybe they need that school lesson, how it is to be in these bodies. So let us not see things as, ooh, they're so bad or I'm so enslaved, because you have to trust that the souls who are wise beyond their seeming appearance, they know what they're doing. They know what path of consciousness they're choosing. Okay? Okay. As always, grounding. Do you see this? Beautiful message. So the grounding message, again, this is my favorite Tantrika card. I call it the Tantrika card when I get it in the reading, or when I do Lumen readings for people who support or donate or, you know, join my Patreon team. I always send them out these Lumen oracles. I always see this as a Tantrika card, like a card of this path, working with the energy, merging the celestial and the physical. So they're telling us, because there's so much coming up now, the only way for us to truly inhabit our bodies is to connect them with the planetary consciousness. Sorry, planetary consciousness. Planetary. I'm having difficulty saying words now, so I'm swallowing them up. The roots. The roots. See the roots? This exactly reflects the Ascension message for this month, and the channel message in my Patreon team. Go join the team if you want to read the whole, it's kind of long channel message. And they're telling us, when you are a master of building your body, this is the building the body, the roots, the anchoring process is there. The template has been set. I've shared this before. Now it's up to us to each be our own mother to this gestation period, so that all of this discernment, all of this wisdom we've gathered, all this information can find its like rightful place. Like, okay, we've been learning about this galactic history. I've been sharing these updates with you for quite some time now. What's the next step? Is like allowing the body to create its own path. Like, knowing history, knowing the core, knowing the root is one place. They're telling me that's important. And that is the first step. But the next step is not participating in none of it and say, no, I'm right here now. I know my roots. And because I'm now galactically liberated, not just planetary liberated, I will build my own sovereign reality that will surpass just what I think now is happening to me, through me on Earth. This goes beyond. This is what they're sharing with me now. They're saying that this process is so much beyond what we think of it to be. Those of you who are maybe still new to this, I really advise you to take the Multidimensional Ascension Consciousness course. It's a really beautiful walkthrough through the nature of how Ascension is not just this physical linear ascension, but it's so much more. And it's an invitation into understanding our history more as galactic. But what they're sharing with me through this card is, once you understand this, once you create this point of synthesis, you understand your light worker, or, you know, being journey, being of light journey here, light bearer, and you create this synthesis, you're going to go back to the roots, which is very simple. And this doesn't mean you're going to go back to primal in terms of tribal and like, you know, we see more from the old, we always relate tribal with, okay, the way things used to be in the ancient past, or, you know, like Lemurian consciousness. They are saying no, because every consciousness is always invented anew. So there's elements we've gathered here and there from, you know, the light worker's perspective of journey. All these elements served the knowledge. It was put in the database. It's all being put in the database. But now, because this database is shifting, it's going to be placed in this new body framework. It's going to function differently. But it's not something that one person can do alone. This is what they're telling me now, is what we're building together as a collective team of light. Whoever still doesn't understand this, I advise you to read the Jeshua channel material. It's also on the webpage, I think, the channelings, but I think they read much nicely in the book format, as well as you support the author who actually put that through, who channeled this work of art, as much as when you watch my videos, so that you actually relate to this in your own, not just resonance, but also your reciprocal energy exchange and value as you support the work as well. So yeah, this is the message they're sharing with me. And we're doing now this, we're writing this, we're putting literally this now in the physical essence and structure of our body. So it's going to grow more and more cellular. So if you've been noticing changes in your body that felt a little defected in a way, like I have told you with my hair, it's like the body will now need a kickstart program that isn't like something just happens like this. A lot of life force is put into this process, and a lot of us have been doing that with much love, and it's being done through us. And we were tired and depleted, and we couldn't participate in the most things people do and celebrate and like all these physical festivities and whatnot. And they said, well, it's all for a reason. But when we will have fun, they're saying, ooh, you know, lightnings will sing with us, not just concertos. Yeah, so it's gonna be a big bang kind of thing. And it's all due to the workings of the many who have been investing themselves in this for many, not just lifetimes, but eons. So this is what they're sharing with me. This might look physical and simple, but at the same time, it's not done in such a way, you know, when you go back, you know, like the journey, like going back to the roots means going back to where we started. But at the same time, we're so much richer for all of these journeys, not just on planet Earth, but beyond. And because of that, we can now go and reinvent ourselves in every fabric and design of life. Because just recently, I think I was on a run and I channeled this. I was like, what's the whole point of all this? I still don't get it from a bigger perspective. And suddenly I got it as an impulse of pure knowing. I couldn't put it into words at first, but it was just so pure. And they were showing me that we will actually reinvent new life forms. The way, you know, life will be, you know, when you go through harsh environments and conditions, and a part of that is sometimes kind of drudgy, right? But because of that, there's such resilience that once you master this within your own body, you might call it corporeal, right? But it's in the consciousness, this resilience grows. And when new life forms will be built from, again, from the root perspective, even the root race, is like they will be created in a way that it will be impenetrable. And a lot of us were a part of this project. So even those of you who were a part of the makings of the human genome and the pool of where the pool of light was gathered from many different facets of the galactic history, or origin, I would rather say origin or heritage. Even that is shared in the Joshua channeling book. All of that now kind of comes to this pivot point, and this creation of the new prototype, just like they want to do the human 3.0, we're working for the human experience, which is impenetrable, which is so sovereign. It's self-born. It's human coming back to its roots, but maintaining the physical body form. And because of it, there's a victory beyond just the victory when you have, you know, when you finish something or your personal project or something you really love doing. This is something of the collective. This is something we can only rejoice as together as the group of light. And I'm so happy this message came through now. So the cards, thank you. The card, as you know, is just pull another one. The card is just like the gateway that opens. The card is not a message in itself. But you see, that's what they're showing me, the reassurance of the golden light. That's it. Doesn't mean, oh, you don't do nothing, it's reassured it's going to happen anyway. No, this means when we're doing it, it's assured. It's bigger than us. This is the message. It's bigger than us, and yet we're all a part of this. What is bigger than us? The us that we think ourselves to be. But a part of us that's like the contributor to this galactic project of harnessing light in order to create new living forms of sustenance which are impenetrable for such experiences of infiltration, darkness, all that. I think this message was huge. I hope you will value it in your own life. To see the bigger picture, don't be afraid of any of the agendas. See beyond them. See them as unified. Can you see them in cooperation with even what you call your projects of light, workings of light? Can you see them maybe the projects of dark? They're trying to push for something they want to master. Either way, I know it sounds silly sometimes to us because we think light is the all-encompassing form of everything. No, love is the all-encompassing essence of life. Life is love. But all these perspectives of something against something are still based on opposition and duality. When we move beyond this, we really are ready to become an integral sovereign being. And I hope you're aware of that and you're doing this, you're walking this mission. I greet you with so much light, with so much lightness and heart, as much as seriousness and sometimes a little spanking. Just kidding. But I love you so much. And even though, like I said, I wasn't always appreciate maybe the way I wanted to be, you know, like that I could keep that word going. Uh, it's always coming up. I feel, yes, there's reassurance of this golden light, and all we have to do is know it's working out for not us personally, but for the greater good of all, that it is serving the great divine plan. So when you have moments of challenge or moments of hardship, whatever, remember this. Go back, maybe rewatch certain parts that will lift you up into greater perspective. Go see maybe if something from the Wingmakers resonates with you. There's other materials about this as well, but don't see them as they have all the answers. See them as one of the missing links. But the greater missing link is that which can only be emanating from within you. So it's not going to be from now on just a few ascended teachers or avatar beings who are coming here, and also those of us who are volunteer souls, but also those who will maybe do that for the first time here on Earth. And because they will, it will become a permanent experience and will be a part of the collective database in the workings and in the great halls of the records. So thank you for being here, for joining. You can join my group on Patreon because, like I said, my work is moving towards there more and ultimately being the main platform now. And thank you again for everything that I was able to share this so freely. Because a lot of people go like, ooh, when they see things like that. But I just have to stick with what they're sharing with me, move beyond fears and what people might think. This is not maybe for everyone yet, but sometimes people say, oh, I was not following for a few years and I'm back. And I'm like, ooh, this resonates so much. Yeah, divine timing. When you're ready, something resonates. That's about it. It's so simple. And if you want to support, if you don't want to be a part of my group on Patreon now, you can also maybe, consider a donation. I have a link down there. You can help support my flow to remain as free as it can and just share the love as I do. And as always, with so much love, wisdom, and power. Take care. Galactic goodbye.